Ryan Carter had always been a man of quiet habits. At 41, he had learned to find peace in the smallest details of life, the kind of moments others overlooked. For him, serenity was not in grand gestures or the chaos of social acclaim, but in the subtle rhythms of his own world. The morning dew clung to the edges of the flower beds he had tended since sunrise, and the gentle rustle of the oak trees in his backyard sounded like a lullaby, soothing even the deepest corners of his mind. His neighbors often wondered why Ryan spent so much time in his garden, meticulously pruning rose bushes, arranging tulips by color, and training climbing vines along the wooden fences. To them, it was just landscaping, but to Ryan, it was much more than that. Each leaf he tended to, each petal he polished with careful fingers, was a stitch in the fabric of his recovery, a thread binding the pieces of himself that had been scattered by betrayal. 3 years ago, his life had collapsed. Jessica, the woman he had loved with quiet devotion, had walked away without warning, her eyes reflecting a coldness that he could not comprehend. "I need a man who excites me," she had whispered one evening, her words slicing through the familiar comfort of their home. "You're too predictable." That was all the explanation he got before she vanished into a life that was not his, a life with Tyler, a man whose arrogance was as evident as the muscles he liked to flaunt. Tyler had everything Ryan did not: bravado, audacity, and the ability to charm with ease. The days after she left were filled with silence that screamed. Ryan wandered through the empty halls of the house they had shared, tracing his fingers along walls that had once held laughter. The kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, they were monuments to memories now tainted by betrayal. But Ryan, unlike some, did not allow despair to consume him. He understood pain, yes, but he also understood healing. And so he turned outward. He planted roses where arguments had once echoed. He laid down paths of cobblestone where tears had fallen. He built a sanctuary, not just for his body, but for his soul. Morning after morning, he would rise before dawn. The sky, painted in shades of pink and orange, became his canvas. The air smelled of damp earth and possibilities, a combination that filled him with quiet satisfaction. His hands, scarred and calloused from years of labor, were proof that he had survived, not merely endured. In the garden, he was neither a husband nor a man betrayed. He was Ryan Carter, the gardener, the creator, the healer of his own wounds. The neighborhood had its rhythm too. Children would run along the sidewalks on their way to school, shouting and laughing, while neighbors hurried to begin their day. Some would nod to him politely, acknowledging his presence, but never truly understanding it. Ryan did not mind. He had long abandoned the need for others to validate his peace. He was content in his solitude, in the harmony he had cultivated among the flowers, the shrubs, and the silent oaks that stood like guardians at the edges of his property. Yet, tranquility is a fragile thing. Ryan knew that even as he nurtured it, there was a tension beneath the surface, a memory that refused to fade entirely. The betrayal had left its mark, subtle but enduring. Certain songs, certain phrases, even the distant laughter of lovers could trigger it. But he met these moments with patience. Pain had taught him to endure, and endurance had taught him that the world continued to spin even when hearts were broken. One afternoon, while Ryan was tying a vine to the trellis, he noticed a figure across the street. It was Tyler. The man was leaning casually against his car, the sunlight catching the sharp angles of his jaw and the confidence that seemed to radiate from him. Tyler's presence was like a crack in glass, sudden, unwelcome, and impossible to ignore. Ryan's fingers tightened on the twine, and for a moment, the garden seemed to shrink around him. He had hoped, for 3 long years, that Tyler would remain distant, that the past would be safely tucked away behind fences and flowers. But here he was, a living reminder that some wounds do not heal simply by patience and soil. Ryan allowed himself a deep breath, forcing the tension from his shoulders. There was no need to react yet. Tyler was someone to observe, to understand, not to confront just yet. Ryan had learned the value of waiting, the power of calm, and the strength of measured action. Returning to his garden, Ryan knelt by a bed of tulips. Their petals were soft, the colors blending like a delicate painting. He pressed his hands into the damp soil, feeling the cool earth seep into his fingers. He imagined each root as a line of defense, each flower a shield against the intrusion of chaos. His sanctuary would not be compromised, not by Tyler, not by memory, not by the lingering shadows of the woman who had once been his world. Evenings in Ryan's garden were even more beautiful. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the blooms, and the air was filled with the scents of jasmine and roses. He would sit in his favorite chair, a worn but comfortable seat placed just so under the largest oak, and simply breathe. There was music here too, not the kind that blared from speakers, but the music of life itself. The chirping of crickets, the whisper of leaves, the soft rustle of a bird taking flight. In these moments, Ryan felt whole again, but serenity, he knew, was always temporary. Shadows linger at the edges of even the brightest gardens, and storms often arrive without warning. Ryan's past, embodied in Tyler, was a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. For now, though, he had his garden. He had his mornings, his evenings, and the quiet strength he had cultivated over years of pain. And in that strength, Ryan Carter found a glimmer of hope that whatever the future held, he would face it not as a man broken by betrayal, but as a man who had learned to grow again, even from ashes. As night fell, Ryan turned the hose off and surveyed his kingdom. Every rosebush, every row of tulips, every curling vine reflected his patience and care. It was more than beauty, it was proof of resilience, a tangible representation of what a man could achieve when he refused to let betrayal define him. And in that quiet, Ryan smiled to himself. Tomorrow, he would rise again, and the garden, like him, would continue to thrive. For Ryan Carter, life had taught a simple but profound lesson. Pain is inevitable, but growth is optional. He had chosen growth. Ryan Carter thought he had left the chaos of his past firmly behind him, sealed away like a letter in a locked drawer. For 3 years, he had cultivated a life of quiet order, measured routines, and deliberate solitude. Yet the world has a way of reminding even the strongest of us that some ghosts are patient, they linger, waiting for the slightest crack in our armor. It began subtly. A glance across the street at a familiar figure leaning against a car. A passing comment from a neighbor carelessly mentioning seeing Tyler at a cafe nearby. At first, Ryan dismissed it, telling himself that coincidence did not deserve attention, that the past had no business intruding on the sanctuary he had built. He bent again to his garden, pruning a rosebush with surgical precision, listening to the soft hum of bees as they moved from flower to flower. But the appearances kept happening. Tyler was there at the local grocery store, lingering in the same aisle, eyes scanning the shelves as though waiting for Ryan to notice him. At the dog park, a casual laugh carried over the fence, unmistakably Tyler's, though he never approached directly. Each sighting, each sound, was like a ripple through Ryan's carefully constructed calm. The garden, which had always been his fortress, suddenly felt exposed, as if the boundaries of his sanctuary were being tested. Ryan tried to steel himself against the unease. He knew confrontation was unnecessary for now. Tyler, he realized, was not acting out of courage or strength, but insecurity. His arrogance was a mask, his bravado a thin veneer over a man who had never experienced genuine loss or quiet triumph. Ryan's peace, however, was something Tyler could never comprehend, because Ryan's power came not from intimidation or posturing, but from patience and resilience. Despite that understanding, a part of Ryan could not ignore the anger rising inside him. It was a slow burn, simmering just beneath the surface, fed by the memory of Jessica's betrayal and Tyler's audacity. Ryan found himself walking his property lines more frequently, checking for signs of intrusion, scanning for any evidence that his solitude was being violated. Every step he took in the garden now carried an edge of vigilance, each breath a reminder that peace required more than patience, it demanded attention. One afternoon, as the sun hung high and heavy over the neighborhood, Ryan noticed Tyler again. This time, closer than before, he stood across the street, leaning casually against his car, wearing the same smug expression he always did. Ryan felt a surge of something he hadn't expected, fear, perhaps, but more than that, a flicker of frustration. The garden, which had been his refuge, now seemed vulnerable, the walls of his sanctuary unable to keep the past from creeping in. Ryan approached the window, peering through the glass at the man who had disrupted the quiet rhythm of his life. Tyler's eyes met his for a brief moment, and Ryan saw it. The arrogance, yes, but also uncertainty. The man was trying to provoke him, to test the boundaries Ryan had set, but Ryan remained still. He turned away, refusing to grant Tyler the satisfaction of reaction. Instead, he focused on the blooms inside, on the tulips whose petals reflected the sunlight like stained glass. His garden had endured storms before, both literal and figurative, and it would endure this as well. But Tyler was persistent. Over the next few weeks, the encounters grew bolder. A car parked too long near Ryan's house, a neighbor passing a message about Tyler lingering at a nearby cafe. Even the local HOA meetings were not immune, with Tyler showing up under the guise of casual conversation, always casting a glance toward Ryan, testing the waters. Each time, Ryan's heart tightened, though he refused to let fear dictate his actions. He understood something crucial. This was not a battle to be fought with confrontation, at least not yet. In the evenings, Ryan returned to his garden with renewed focus. The sunset painted the flowers in molten gold and soft crimson, and he allowed himself the small solace of beauty. He knelt by the rose bushes, brushing his fingers along the delicate petals, each touch a reminder of his own patience and resilience. Tyler might linger in the shadows of his life, but the garden, his creation, remained untouched. Every bloom was a silent testament. He had survived betrayal, and he would survive this intrusion too. Ryan's thoughts often drifted to Jessica during these moments. He did not dwell on love lost as one might obsess over a scar, but he acknowledged the pain and the lessons it carried. Her departure had shattered him, yes, but it had also forced him to grow in ways he never would have otherwise. Tyler was a reminder of that growth, a test of how far he had come and how unshakable he had become. One evening, as twilight descended and shadows lengthened across the garden, Ryan noticed movement at the edge of his property. Tyler's figure appeared again, not aggressively, but with that same calculated smugness. Ryan felt a pulse of irritation, a tug of old anger, but he also felt something new, a surge of clarity. The garden, the sanctuary he had built, was not just for himself. It was a declaration, a shield, and a testament to the man he had become. This realization gave Ryan strength. He walked slowly to the edge of the yard, standing under the largest oak, and simply observed. Tyler, sensing the shift, hesitated. There was no fear in Ryan's posture, no sign of weakness, only quiet confidence and unshakable resolve. It was a moment of silent confrontation without words, a standoff that neither had initiated but both understood. For the first time since Tyler had reappeared in his life, Ryan felt the power of his own composure. He knew he could not prevent the past from reaching him entirely, but he could choose how to respond. He could choose to remain anchored in his sanctuary, to let the beauty and patience he had cultivated protect him from the chaos Tyler sought to impose. As night fell, Ryan returned to the heart of the garden. He watered the plants, adjusted the trellises, and paused to inhale the scent of jasmine and rose. Each task grounded him, each small act of care a declaration of independence from the turmoil Tyler represented. For Ryan Carter, life was a garden in every sense. It required attention, patience, and unwavering resilience. And just like the blooms he nurtured, he too would endure, blossom, and thrive, no matter how persistent the ghosts of the past. By the time the moon rose over the oaks, Ryan felt a quiet satisfaction. Tyler might linger at the edges of his life, but he could never penetrate the core of what Ryan had built. The garden was more than flowers. It was a fortress, a testament, and a promise to himself that he would continue to grow, despite everything. And in that quiet moment, Ryan Carter knew something profound. Peace is never given. It is claimed. And he had claimed it. Fiercely, unshakably, and beautifully. Ryan Carter had managed to maintain his sanctuary for years. The garden was not merely a patch of earth filled with flowers and vines. It was a reflection of his soul, a tangible proof of resilience after betrayal. Yet even the strongest defenses have their limits, and Tyler, with his calculated arrogance and persistence, was testing every boundary Ryan had built. It began with subtle intrusions, barely noticeable at first. A car parked just outside his property line, a shadow moving across the corner of his yard, whispers from neighbors that Tyler had been asking questions about Ryan's routines. Ryan, who had always been observant, recognized the pattern immediately. Tyler wasn't merely coincidental, he was deliberate, invasive, a reminder that some people refuse to respect boundaries until they are made unmistakably clear. The first real confrontation came one Sunday morning. Ryan was kneeling by the tulips, hands in the soil, feeling the cool earth seep into his fingers, when he noticed Tyler approaching from the far end of the street. At first, Tyler appeared casual, strolling as though he belonged there, but there was a deliberate precision in the way he walked, a confidence designed to provoke. Ryan's chest tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. This garden had been his fortress, and he would not allow a shadow from the past to taint it. Tyler stopped at the edge of Ryan's property, just far enough to appear respectful, though his eyes told a different story. "Beautiful garden," he said, voice dripping with thinly veiled sarcasm. "I almost didn't recognize you with all this growing stuff." Ryan's fingers tightened around the rosebush he had been pruning. He did not respond immediately, letting Tyler's words hang in the air. The man was testing him, pushing, looking for a crack in his composure. Ryan understood this tactic. It was the same arrogance that had drawn Jessica to Tyler years ago, the illusion of dominance, the belief that intimidation equaled superiority. "I've always liked gardening," Ryan said finally, voice even, steady. "It teaches patience, something you might not understand." Tyler's lips curled into a half smile. "Patience is fine until it becomes obsession. Some people spend so much time in their little gardens, they forget how the world works." Ryan didn't flinch. He straightened slowly, dusting soil from his hands. "The world works fine," he said, "without people like you dictating it." Tyler's eyes flickered, a hint of irritation breaking through his practiced composure. For the first time, Ryan realized that Tyler's arrogance was fragile, that beneath the bravado lay insecurity. And in that realization, Ryan found strength. He had spent years rebuilding himself, cultivating patience and resilience, and he would not allow this man to undermine it. The encounters escalated over the following weeks. Tyler began leaving messages with mutual acquaintances, spreading rumors about Ryan's personal life. He would show up at the edge of the neighborhood with friends, lingering near Ryan's property as if daring him to react. Ryan remained composed, but each intrusion tested his resolve. The sanctuary he had built was no longer a quiet refuge. It had become a stage for the subtle battle between dignity and provocation. At night, Ryan would sit in his garden, lanterns casting warm light across the flowers, reflecting off dew-kissed petals. The roses, tulips, and climbing vines seemed to whisper encouragement, reminding him of the strength he had cultivated. The garden had endured seasons of storm and neglect, and it would endure this as well. Ryan began to realize that his battle was not with Tyler, but with the lingering echoes of his own past, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the quiet self-doubt that had once threatened to consume him. One evening, Tyler crossed a line. He parked his car directly across from Ryan's property and lingered, phone in hand, clearly documenting Ryan's garden and movements. Ryan noticed him from the kitchen window, the familiar tension tightening in his chest. He walked outside, letting the soft soil of the garden give him grounding, and approached the street with deliberate calm. "Do you need something, Tyler?" Ryan asked, voice firm, carrying across the narrow street. Tyler leaned casually against his car, pretending nonchalance, but there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Just admiring your commitment," he said, words laced with mockery. Ryan's gaze didn't waver. "Admiration doesn't involve trespassing," he said. "You've been testing boundaries for weeks. Consider this a warning. Stay off my property and respect my life." Tyler smirked. "You're still predictable," he said, still trying to control everything. Ryan's patience, honed over 3 years, met this provocation with the calm of unshakable certainty. "Control isn't what I seek," he replied. "I seek peace, something you've never understood." The moment lingered like a held breath, the tension palpable. Tyler finally straightened, realizing that Ryan would not yield. With a dismissive shake of his head, he left, but Ryan knew this was only the beginning. Tyler had been testing the waters, and now he knew that Ryan's resolve was formidable. In the days that followed, Ryan threw himself even more deeply into his garden. Each plant, each carefully tended row of tulips or climbing rose became a symbol of defiance and resilience. He pruned, planted, watered, and watched the life he had nurtured flourish, a silent reminder that he would not be shaken. Tyler's presence was a challenge, yes, but one that Ryan was equipped to face not with rage, but with unwavering strength. Ryan also began to notice the subtle ways the intrusion had affected him. He was more vigilant, more aware of every shadow, every passing glance. Yet he did not let fear dictate his life. Instead, he used it as motivation to reinforce the boundaries of his sanctuary. The garden, once merely a refuge, had become a fortress, a place where patience, diligence, and resilience reigned supreme. One morning, Ryan noticed a small act of defiance. A row of tulips near the fence had been bent, apparently trampled. The evidence was subtle but unmistakable. Tyler had crossed the line. Anger surged, but Ryan did not allow it to consume him. He knelt by the flowers, carefully straightened them, and whispered to himself, "You cannot touch what I've built inside." That day, Ryan understood that the battle with Tyler was inevitable. The man's provocations were escalating, and eventually he would need to be confronted not with emotion, but with strength and clarity. The garden had taught him patience, resilience, and the power of quiet determination. Now it would also teach him how to defend what was rightfully his, without losing the calm he had fought so hard to cultivate. As the sun set, painting the garden in hues of amber and gold, Ryan stood beneath the largest oak, surveying the sanctuary he had built. Each petal, each leaf, each meticulously tended row of flowers was a testament to his endurance. Tyler might linger in the shadows, testing his resolve, but Ryan Carter had learned the most important lesson of all. Boundaries are not simply suggested, they are enforced. And when the time came, he would enforce them with dignity, precision, and unshakable calm. For now, Ryan returned to his work, pruning, watering, and tending, letting the garden absorb his focus, absorb his patience. The battle lines had been drawn and Tyler had stepped across them. But Ryan, the man who had survived betrayal, who had nurtured life from pain, was ready. The next move was his, and he would play it with the quiet, unyielding strength that had carried him through the storm. The tension that had been simmering for weeks finally reached its breaking point. Ryan Carter, who had long cultivated patience and resilience in the quiet sanctity of his garden, realized that subtlety and endurance alone were no longer enough. Tyler's provocations had escalated beyond passive intimidation. Now they demanded a reckoning. Ryan had spent countless hours contemplating the approach, walking through every possible scenario in his mind. He knew that confrontation could not be driven by anger, or it would descend into chaos. It had to be measured, controlled, and resolute, just like the life he had rebuilt from the ruins of betrayal. It began on a late afternoon, when the golden sun dipped low, painting shadows across the neighborhood. Ryan had been tending to his flower beds, the scent of soil and roses grounding him, when he noticed Tyler's car idling at the end of the street. The man stepped out slowly, his posture casual. But Ryan recognized the same calculated arrogance he had seen so many times before. Tyler's smirk was familiar, almost predictable now, but Ryan felt none of the fear or hesitation that had marked their previous encounters. Today, he would not merely defend his peace, he would reclaim it. Tyler strolled toward Ryan's yard, pretending a casual interest in the blooms, but his intent was clear. "You've really outdone yourself," Tyler said, voice laced with condescension. "All this beauty must feel good to hide away in your little world." Ryan paused, brushing soil from his hands. His eyes met Tyler's, steady and unwavering. "It feels good because it's earned," he said. "Unlike some people, I create value instead of tearing it down." Tyler's smirk faltered slightly. "You still think words are enough to intimidate me?" Ryan straightened fully, standing beneath the largest oak in his yard. "I don't intend to intimidate you," he replied. "I intend to show you that boundaries exist, and when they are crossed, there are consequences." The air between them felt charged, a quiet tension that vibrated across the street like a held breath. Tyler took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Boundaries?" he scoffed. "You think your little garden protects you? You think it makes you strong?" Ryan's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in the resolve that had carried him through 3 years of pain. "Strength isn't measured in bravado or intimidation," he said. "Strength is patience, strength is endurance, strength is knowing who you are and refusing to let someone else define you." Tyler laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "You've changed," he said. "Not for the better." Ryan shook his head. "I've changed because I had to survive, and now I live for myself. That's why your presence doesn't control me anymore." For a moment, Tyler hesitated. The arrogance that had always masked his insecurities faltered under Ryan's calm certainty. This was not the man who had cowered silently when Jessica left. This was a man who had rebuilt his life, piece by piece, refusing to surrender to bitterness or despair. Tyler had expected a reaction, some sign of fear, frustration, or weakness. What he found instead was composure, a quiet but unshakable power. "You think you've won?" Tyler asked, voice low, almost a hiss. Ryan stepped forward, closing the distance between them while maintaining the calm that had become his signature strength. "Winning isn't the goal," he said. "Peace is. And you have no place here to disrupt it. Not with words, not with actions, not with threats." Tyler's posture stiffened. He had underestimated Ryan the same way he had underestimated the slow but relentless power of patience and resilience. "You can't stop me from existing," he said, more to convince himself than Ryan. Ryan's gaze did not waver, no. "But you can choose to respect boundaries. And if you refuse, you will face consequences not from anger, but from justice, from clarity, from knowing that I will not tolerate intrusion into my life." The confrontation stretched, each word measured, each movement deliberate. Tyler had intended to provoke, to dominate, to remind Ryan of past vulnerabilities. But Ryan's calm certainty deflected each attempt like sunlight off glass. The garden, his sanctuary, seemed to stand with him. Each flower a silent witness to the strength he had nurtured. Finally, Tyler's composure cracked. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, his smirk replaced with a tension he could not mask. "You're different," he muttered. "I didn't expect this." Ryan smiled faintly, a small curve that carried years of lessons learned. "You underestimate the power of patience and the value of what's earned," he said. "I didn't rebuild my life for you, I rebuilt it for me, and nothing you do can change that." Tyler's hands clenched at his sides. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came that could shake Ryan's resolve. With one last glance, he turned and walked back to his car, the confrontation over for now, but the lesson indelibly clear. Ryan's strength was not in aggression, but in composure. His boundaries were not mere suggestions, they were impervious walls, tested and proven unbreakable. After Tyler left, Ryan returned to the heart of his garden. The roses glowed softly in the fading light, their petals kissed by the last rays of Sunday. He knelt to water a row of tulips, letting the rhythm of care calm the lingering adrenaline from the confrontation. This garden was more than soil and blooms. It was a living testament to resilience, patience, and the quiet, unyielding power of a man who refused to be defined by betrayal. Ryan reflected on the moment, understanding its significance. Confrontation had not been about proving dominance over Tyler. It had been about reclaiming his life, asserting boundaries, and demonstrating that strength is measured in dignity, patience, and clarity. Tyler had tested him, but Ryan had emerged not only unbroken, but elevated. Night fell over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across the garden. Ryan lit the lanterns he had placed along the pathways, the warm glow illuminating the flowers and vines like a gentle celebration of endurance. He sat beneath the largest oak, feeling the cool breeze on his face, listening to the subtle symphony of life, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, and the distant hum of a neighborhood settling into night. In that quiet moment, Ryan Carter realized something profound. Confrontation is inevitable in life, but true strength lies in how it is faced. Rage can destroy, fear can cripple, but composure, clarity, and patience can rebuild even the most shattered of lives. Tyler had forced the confrontation, but Ryan had defined the outcome. He had turned intrusion into affirmation, aggression into clarity, and challenge into a testament of resilience. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Ryan allowed himself a rare smile, a full, genuine expression of triumph, not over Tyler, not over the past, but over doubt, fear, and the lingering shadows of betrayal. He had faced the storm, stood firm, and emerged stronger. And in the quiet glow of his garden, Ryan Carter knew the most important truth of all. No one could take from him the life he had rebuilt, the peace he had earned, or the strength that had been forged in the fires of heartache. His sanctuary, his garden, and his soul were his alone, unshakable, unyielding, and beautiful. The confrontation with Tyler had passed, but Ryan Carter knew that true peace was not won in a single moment. It was a continuous journey, a steady cultivation of strength, patience, and self-respect. As the days unfolded, Ryan felt the tension that had shadowed his life for weeks begin to dissolve, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had faced the storm and emerged unbroken. Morning came with its familiar serenity. The dew clung to the petals of the roses, tulips, and climbing vines, sparkling in the first rays of sunlight. Ryan stepped into the garden barefoot, feeling the cool earth under his feet, grounding him in the present. This garden, once a refuge from betrayal, had now become a symbol of victory, not over another person, but over doubt, fear, and the lingering shadows of the past. For the first time in years, Ryan allowed himself to fully breathe. He walked slowly along the winding paths, touching each plant, feeling the life in every leaf and petal. Each bloom told a story of resilience, of patience, and of the quiet power of someone who refuses to let betrayal define him. It had taken years to reach this point, but the journey had been worth every moment of struggle. Tyler's departure from the neighborhood was quiet, almost anticlimactic. Ryan didn't need to celebrate it with words or gestures. The man's absence was already a relief, a return to normalcy. Ryan understood that he had not conquered Tyler by aggression or anger, but by remaining steadfast, composed, and true to himself. That realization brought a deeper satisfaction than any fleeting victory ever could. Ryan spent the following days immersing himself in his garden. He pruned overgrown branches, planted new rows of flowers, and nurtured the vines that climbed gracefully along the fences. Each act of care reinforced his connection to life, growth, and renewal. He noticed small changes, the tulips blooming earlier than expected, the roses sending out new shoots, the vines intertwining more beautifully than before. These signs mirrored his own journey. Growth was not linear, but it was inevitable when tended with patience and love. The neighborhood began to feel different too. The laughter of children in the streets, once a faint backdrop to Ryan's quiet contemplation, now felt like part of the rhythm of his life. Neighbors greeted him warmly, noticing the transformation in the garden and in him. There were no whispers of the past, no reminders of betrayal, only acknowledgement of the beauty he had created and the strength he had shown. Ryan also began to reclaim small pleasures he had long neglected. He brewed coffee on the porch in the mornings, savoring the aroma and warmth as the sun rose. He read books he had set aside years ago, losing himself in stories of adventure, resilience, and hope. He even began to play soft music in the evenings, letting the melodies blend with the hum of life in his garden. These moments, simple yet profound, became a testament to the life he had rebuilt, one filled not with fear, regret, or anger, but with quiet contentment and fulfillment. One afternoon, Ryan sat beneath the largest oak, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of Jessica, Tyler, and the years of heartache that had seemed insurmountable at the time. And yet, he did not dwell on pain or bitterness. Instead, he honored the lessons they had taught him, the necessity of patience, the strength of resilience, and the value of boundaries. Each heartbreak, each challenge, had shaped him into the man he had become, a man capable of creating beauty, facing adversity, and emerging stronger than before. Ryan realized that true renewal was not simply about reclaiming peace, it was about embracing life fully, without hesitation or fear. He walked through the garden, touching the petals of the roses, feeling the soft texture of the tulips, and letting the scent of jasmine fill his senses. Each plant, each flower, each vine was a reflection of his own growth, a tangible manifestation of the patience, care, and strength he had cultivated over the years. Evenings were the most magical. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the garden transformed into a tapestry of gold, amber, and crimson hues. Ryan lit the lanterns he had carefully placed along the pathways, casting a warm glow over the flowers and vines. The gentle hum of crickets, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the soft calls of distant birds created a symphony that celebrated life, resilience, and renewal. It was during one of these evenings that Ryan understood the final truth of his journey. Peace is not a destination, it is a choice, made every day, in every action, and in every moment of patience and care. Tyler's provocations had tested him, but they had not broken him. Jessica's betrayal had hurt him deeply, but it had also forced him to rebuild, to grow, and to discover the strength he had always possessed. The garden was more than a sanctuary, it was a living proof that life, when nurtured with care and resilience, could bloom even after the harshest storms. Ryan decided to share some of his peace with others. He began volunteering at a local community garden, teaching children and neighbors the art of planting, nurturing, and growing. He shared stories of patience and resilience, of the importance of boundaries, and of the quiet strength that comes from facing adversity with composure. Through this, he realized that his journey was not just about personal healing, it was about inspiring growth in others, about showing that even after betrayal and heartbreak, life could be beautiful again. The garden continued to flourish, each season bringing new growth, new blossoms, and new life. Ryan found joy in the changing rhythms of nature, in the small victories of seeing a plant thrive, in the quiet moments of reflection beneath the oak tree that had witnessed so much of his journey. He had transformed his pain into beauty, his sorrow into resilience, and his challenges into lessons. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the leaves and the flowers shimmered with dew, Ryan felt a profound sense of contentment. He was no longer the man haunted by betrayal, no longer the man wary of intrusion or provocation. He was a man fully present in his life, fully connected to his sanctuary, and fully aware of the strength that had carried him through adversity. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of roses, tulips, and jasmine, and smiled. The garden, the neighborhood, and the quiet rhythm of life around him were not just signs of survival, they were signs of renewal, growth, and the enduring power of resilience. Ryan Carter had faced betrayal, confrontation, and the lingering shadows of the past. He had endured storms, nurtured life from ashes, and reclaimed his peace with dignity and patience. And now, in the glow of his flourishing garden, surrounded by the beauty he had cultivated and the lessons he had learned, he finally understood the full meaning of renewal. Life, when nurtured with care and strength, could always bloom again. As twilight descended and the stars began to twinkle above, Ryan sat beneath the oak, closing his eyes and letting the gentle breeze caress his face. He had built more than a garden, he had built a life, a sanctuary, and a legacy of resilience. And in that quiet, golden moment, he knew with unwavering certainty that no storm, no betrayal, and no intruder could ever take that away from him. For Ryan Carter, the past had forged him, the present had strengthened him, and the future, like his garden, was a promise of continued growth, beauty, and peace.